Okay, hang on, I just need to close my curtain. Okay, all right. How are we all? Anybody injured? I know a couple of you are injured. Nicole, where are you? How's your collarbone? There you are in the middle.
Yeah, it's still sore, but I actually can do more than I expected. So we're going through it. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, all right. Did you speak to Mika about it? Where's Mika? Can't see. Oh, she
I did.
Yeah. It's horrible. I've got to like find you on the screen. Okay, but you know, don't go mad or hurt it more than you've hurt it already.
Yeah, no, I'm working on that. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Okay, right. Okay, peak pose sequencing. I'm presuming you are all fine with your pose analysis. Nod happily, yes. Yes, all very silent. Okay, all right. So it's due, when is it due? On Monday. Okay, so your 3 poses are due on Monday. All right. Okay, so today we're going to talk about peak pose sequencing, and you guys have got to get me your summary. I believe it's on the 14th of August. You've got to hand in your summary. It's on the schedule, so don't take my word that it's the 14th. I haven't got the schedule in front of me, and I always like to go and look rather than just say it's, but I think it is the 14th. Okay, so now everybody, I think, has chosen a peak pose. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk around some of those examples, work through a couple of things, and then tie that into the homework that you've got to do, right? So have all of you got your template? So everybody found the template, okay? Because that's like the first thing. If you've got your peak pose and you've got the template, you're halfway there, all right?
So what is the template? Is the template on page 220?
No, it's in a document.
There are a couple I found. One says peak pose vinyasa intelligence sequences, and the other one teaching vinyasa sequences. I'm not sure if it's one of those two.
Intelligence sequencing.
Intelligent. Okay.
Yeah. So it's literally the first page on that document. But Lynn, you've definitely found what you think is the right thing because you've already sent me a lot of stuff. So what you've sent me looks fine. So
okay.
you must have found it at some stage or other because it's definitely, it's exactly what the template looks like.
Okay.
So
okay.
Yay. Okay. So I'm expecting your summary as that template is set out. The first thing you give me, I want it to be set out like that, okay? Not because I'm really pedantic, but it's purposefully done like that to guide you, okay? Because what has happened in the past when we don't do it that way is people go off onto totally different tangents and then I have to make them redo it again. So this is really to prompt you to think in a very structured way, and then you're going to give me 14 to 16 poses, okay? So we'll talk about that a little bit. So on that template, it basically does exactly what your pose analysis does, which is to say, what is your pose? What category is it? What strength does it require? What flexibility? What skill work, the actions of the pose? What will tire? What type of class are you doing? So questions around that. Then it says to you, okay, please give me your, I think it's 12 to 16 poses. It's around about that many poses, right? I'd go for 14, right? And then what it says is it says lying, seated, standing, etc. Okay, everybody got that? Now, what that means is it's just a general guide, all right? Because we have progressions in a vinyasa sequence. We start off slower, we build up to maybe 40 minutes where it's really, really strong, and then we come down a little bit again. So it's just a guide. It doesn't mean you have to come up with lying poses, seated poses. You probably will have to do standing poses, but you do not have to do lying down poses. It's not compulsory. It depends on what your pose is. If you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. They can be seated and standing, or all standing, or standing and inversions. Does that make a little bit of sense? Because they're only there to give you a guide. I don't need you to come up with 3 lying, 3 seated, 3 standing, and your main big pose. Okay? Makes sense? Does that make sense to everybody? Nod, shake, kind of round, sort of, don't know, maybe. All right? So it's absolutely fine. You know, what you will also find is that the easier your peak pose, the more you may want to start lying down. It really does depend. But if you're doing a very advanced peak pose, there's not a lot of point starting lying down, okay? So we'll talk about that as we go through the different poses. The idea is that when you come up with those 12 to 16 poses, of which the last one is your peak pose, we're not talking about cool down, we're not talking about anything like that. These are just the main poses, okay, in your sequence, right? The idea is that they're progressive. So if we were going to say peak pose is splits, we wouldn't want to start with we wouldn't want to start with Ardha Hanumanasana, half splits. We'd want to warm up first, right? Maybe we'd want to warm up lying down on the ground. Maybe we want to warm up by doing pyramid, all of those things. But the poses are progressive. So we don't start with a hard one and end with an easier one. We do it the other way around, okay? Because remember that what we're trying to do, especially with viscoelasticity, with flexibility, is to warm up. And you guys know all this, unless you're very, very, very flexible. You kind of, when you come into a class, you want to start warming up slowly. You don't want the first pose to be splits, okay? Because we like to warm up. So that's the progression of the poses in that general template way, okay? You can't use similar poses again to count as 2 different poses, all right? So if you're going to give me low lunge and lizard, they're not 2 different poses. They're pretty much the same pose, okay? It's not a strict thing, so don't worry about it. I'm giving you a guidance around it, all right? So if you do things like crescent lunge, high crescent lunge, and full warrior 1, it's the same pose. Okay, unless you do something substantially different in the pose, right? So don't worry about it too much, but I may come back to you and go, that doesn't count as a pose. Low lunge and lizard are kind of the same thing. They don't count as different poses, okay? All right, so, and what I want to be really emphatic about, so make it very, very clear, is that this is a learning process. If you put the work in, I don't mind that it's wrong, okay? I'm there to guide you to go, hang on a second, what about this? What about that? Which is why I want your poses first before you go and add your transitions, because that is going to take you a long, long time. I'm warning you in advance. To put together the full 60 minutes is going to take you ages. So put time aside to do it. Coming up with the poses, normally not terribly long, but to actually put together a proper sequence with transitions takes some time, okay? So when you do the transition stuff, it takes time because you have to do it, because if you don't do it, you won't be able to time it properly. Okay, and I can normally see when I get the little thing that it's too short or it's too long. Yes, Michelle.
So you only want us to list gosh, there's a gale force wind going on out here, sorry. You only want us to literally list the poses, that's it. Just a list of 12 to 16 poses.
For your first thing that you submit. So the 14,
Right, perfect. And that's, okay, perfect.
I want that template. I want
Great.
strength, flexibility, skill filled in.
Yep.
Bang, that template, fill it in. Basically.
Okay, perfect.
And then we will go from there. I'm going to talk to you. I don't want to get too tied up in transitions today. I'm going to talk to you about transitions tomorrow. Okay, so we can keep it with peak pose sequencing just today to get those 14 to 16 customers. All right. Okay. Any questions about the template and what to fill in? No. Gary?
Is the template the one where at the top says pose breakdown example half moon?
Yes,
That's the one.
that's the one. And it says strength, skill, going the whole way down. Okay.
So by the 14th, we need to have the 14 to 16 poses, but not the transitions. We add those later.
Add those later. Absolutely perfect. The reason I don't want you to start with transitions now is literally to save you time. If I go, that doesn't count as a pose, or you're repeating too many things, then you're wasting your time trying to plan the transitions around them. So I'd rather just sort of get you guys to tick the boxes first, and then you can go, okay, now I can add in the transitions. Okay. Any other questions? Nicole, have you got your hand up? Nicole?
Yes, I do. So the peak pose that we've sent to you on the 3rd of August, that would be our main peak pose.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
You all sent me a post. I can't remember everybody's. I've written down a general idea of what the group has chosen. But yes, just one pose you sent to me, and then I said yes. If I haven't said yes, you need to check it with me. But I pretty much said, sure, yes, no, do this, maybe made a couple of suggestions, that pose, okay?
Okay.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's move on. So today what I want to do is I want to just cover a broad idea of the big categories in yoga in terms of sequencing. And what I've done is I've taken your poses, pretty much everybody's pose, some people not, because you fit in with other ones, right? So what I want to do is cover the big general ideas around those poses that you've chosen so that we can kind of start brainstorming and help you with your pose choice, okay? All right, so the first load of poses that I want to go through are the arm balances, the people that have chosen arm balances. And this is really good for all of you to think about. So put your hands up if you chose an arm balance. So quite a lot of you, all right? Okay, so generally the arm balances were split into a couple of things. Somebody chose, oh, don't worry about it, I'll talk about it just now. But what I want to talk about is arm balances in general are stuff you do on top of your arms, okay? This is the key, right? Stuff you do on top of your arms, right? You can't do stuff with your arms on top of your arms. You do stuff with your torso and your legs, okay? So when we look, and I know Laura went over some arm balances last week with you. So I've got a couple of generalizations here. So I'm going to take two kind of ideas. So we've got Ekapada Galavasana, flying pigeon, okay? That category of arm balances. And we've got the twisted arm balances, Astabhakrasana, 8 angle, and twisted crow, okay? Both of those, or make twisted arm balances and flying pigeon, are stuff that you do on top of your arms, okay? Different stuff. So in order to sequence, we kind of have to go, what are we doing on top of our arms? Okay, so that's things. So when we look at something like Ekapada Galavasana, flying pigeon. Does everybody know what flying pigeon is? Yes, no, okay, all right. Okay, so what stuff are we doing on top of our arms in flying pigeon? And only the arm balance people can answer.
Pigeon pose.
Sorry, put your hand up, I can't see, yeah?
Pigeon
Belinda?
pose.
Pigeon pose, sort of, yes, Jamie.
Isn't it a figure 4?
Yes, it's more like a figure 4 than a pigeon pose, okay? But both of them are under what category of poses?
External rotation.
External rotation, hip external rotation. Does everybody understand that? So it's basically when I take my leg out to the side. So it's not in front of me, it's slightly out to the side, okay? Hip external rotation poses. Okay, so why is Ekapada Galavasana more like a cradle 4 or figure 4, like Jamie said, than a pigeon? Although pigeon is a perfect prep for it. Nicole.
Is it because your back leg is not an extension?
No, we're talking
difference?
about the front leg. There's a reason that the front leg is in a figure 4 shape and not a pigeon shape. Why? Belinda.
I think because your front foot is flexed, as you do with a figure 4.
Front foot is flexed, absolutely, but something even more than the front foot. Nicole B?
You're not taking your knee out to the side.
You are taking your knee slightly out to the side, but we're getting there. So the foot is flexed, the knee is actually out to the side. Maybe not as much as pigeon, you're right, but what does that mean, Jamie?
Isn't the shin maybe brought more parallel to the front of the mat, more than in pigeon?
The shin is brought more parallel to the front of the mat. That's absolutely right. And why is that important?
This is going to balance on your arms.
There you go. Okay. So Nicole D, that's absolutely perfect because it's got a balance on your arms. All right. So when we do the sequencing is about strength, flexibility, and skill. Okay. Those are the 3 things. So the first thing we have to look at in the pose is Ekapada Galavasana, flying pigeon. What pose is it? We know it's an arm balance, right? That's what it is. Normally, that tells us what will tire, okay? It's like when you're doing a standing one-legged pose as your peak pose, dancers, warrior 3, whatever the case may be. We know that because you're standing on one leg all the time, it's highly likely that your one leg is going to tire, right? Okay, and then we look at flying pigeon and we go, okay, what do we know we need for the action of arm balances? Hands up, I can't, when you speak, I can't say, sorry, put your hands up, Micah.
The drishti and then looking forwards, leaning forwards.
Yes, and what else? I'm going to keep you on because you've got them all. And one more, Micah.
The lever that he had.
The lever and another thing.
Chaturanga.
Yeah, to create the shelf.
There you go, the shelf. Okay, well done, Micah. I really put her on the spot there. She had to come up with all 5. Okay, well done. That was really good. So those are the key things in all of the arm balances. First, before we even look forward and lean forward, and the leaning is the lever, we have to put the stuff on top of our arms. We have to create the shelf, okay? And in the different arm balances, the shelves are slightly different, okay? The stuff that's put on top of our chaturanga shaped arms in Ekapada Galavasana, in flying pigeon, the more parallel that shin is, the easier we can put it on top of our arms, right? Can you imagine if we were instructing it to be more in a pigeon shape, so in like that, rather than parallel? Here are my arms in front. If it's in like that as a pigeon shape, I've lost my shelf. Okay? Some people it'll be in a little bit, but generally the more parallel, the more cradle, as Jamie said, cradle four, the more we can put the shin on top of the arm. And then, like Belinda said, the foot is flexed. And what does the flexed foot help us do?
Hook down.
Hook. Yes, I heard hook. Come here. It helps us hook, right? And hooking is what keeps us there, right? So we know two things are hand in hand. The pose is an arm balance, so it requires quite a bit of strength. The pose, Ekapada Galavasana, is also quite a flexibility orientated arm balance because of the need for doing the cradle four. So there's our flexibility, hip external rotation, cradle fours like mad, okay? Then we also know that it's an action-based pose. Like a load of poses don't really have the need for something as skilled as Ekapada Galavasana, where you have to know where to place that arm. You have to know where to hook your foot. You have to know that you have to look forward, lean forward, levers, all of those things. So you can see it's quite a complex pose. And each of the things, strength, skill, flexibility in that pose are almost equal. So in your sequence, you're going to have to work a lot of all of those things, okay? So if you took something like splits and thought about it in terms of strength, skill, flexibility, what is splits? Does it require strength?
No.
Micah? No.
All about flexibility.
It's all about flexibility. Flexibility in the hamstring, flexibility in the quads, okay? That's all splits is about. Does it require skill? Do I have to teach you how to do splits? No, Celine shaking her head. No, I don't. Because what I have to do is go step forward, slide your front leg forward, hold on your hands, and if you can wriggle the leg forward a little bit more, bang, you're in splits. If you can't, stay there. There's nothing else I can do. If you don't have the flexibility, yeah, it's a classic thing with some of the poses in terms of demonstration. Something like Ekapada Galavasana, I would probably have to demonstrate, but there's no point me demonstrating splits. It's not going to help you do splits at all, okay? So you can see that splits is a flexibility pose, whereas flying pigeon requires action, skill, and strength, okay? What's the back leg doing? This is how complex this pose is. What's the back leg doing? I know you did this in inversions this morning with Laura, so you better tell me, otherwise I'll be cross.
Hip extension.
It's doing, who said that? I can't see, nobody's putting their arm. Okay, so hip extension. So what does that mean? How do I bring hip extension into my sequencing?
When you're in your down dog,
When you're in your down dog, perfect. What else? Where else can I do it? Natalie?
Standing splits.
Standing splits. Yep. Where else can I do it?
low lunge.
Low lunge. Yeah, that's a challenging one. Go for it, Chloe. That's really challenging because you can't just have the leg out at the back. You'd have to lean forward and lift the leg. Okay, so which I've seen it taught. It's great fun, but it's actually the ability to get the leg up off the ground. So what other pose has your leg out behind you?
Warrior 3.
Warrior 3. And could you not in Warrior 3 do something like bring your leg in, your back leg into kind of like a Shiva squat, so like a little thing, or into your chest even, and then take it back into Warrior 3. What about in down dog, three-legged dog, knee into chest? There's your rounding, take the leg back up, okay? What, cat cow, knee into chest, take the leg back up. Even in things like half moon, taking the leg back is a big part of Ekapada Galavasana, flying pigeon. So you can see just that pose, that is really, really complex. But if we break it down into those things, you can bring all of those elements into teaching, okay? So now let's look at the other groups of arm balances, were the ones we were talking about, which are Parshvabhakasana, twisted crow, okay, and Ashtavakrasana, okay, 8-angle pose. Does everybody know which poses we're talking about? I know that Laura covered them. Yeah, Gary's nodding. Okay, so category, arm balances. Stuff on top of arm balances, stuff on top. So in Parshvabhakasana, what are we doing?
Twisting.
Twisting, okay? We're twisting. Do we have to be really flexy in our spine to twist for Parshvabhakasana, for twisted crow?
I think so.
Who said something?
I think yes.
You think yes. Okay, that's great. Think about it. So why do you think we have to be so flexible in our spines to twist?
Because you won't get there if you're not.
But you are right in a different way. So that's the action of the pose. So we have to twist. So everybody put your hands up like this. Keep your knees crossed or whatever you've got them doing like that, and turn and twist to the side. Okay, keep your knees facing forward. Can you all twist to the side? Okay, you've got the flexibility range for Parshvabhakasana. If you can only twist it here, it's going to be a problem. Here, no problem. Most people have, the 99.999% of people have the ability to do this. This is the action of the pose. Okay, we don't need to warm up the flexibility, but we can throw in some twist. But like Nicole B says, you need to get there. So what will be in the way?
Your knees.
Not so much your knees, but yes, we're on the right track. What can get in the way of getting there? Because we've got to get our hands to the floor in a twist. Celine's pointing to her elbows. Elbows, they won't get in the way. They might not get into the right place. What can get in the way that you can't do anything about? I have a lot of people doing this, okay? I have to get to the ground. What can get in the way of me getting to the ground?
Thighs.
Thighs. Thighs and boobs. Okay? Seriously, it's like Celine sent me a message about boobs earlier, not about her boobs. I just saw it briefly before, but she said, can they get in the way? Like, do they get in the way? Yes, they really, really, really do, okay? The more girth you have, whether it's thighs or boobs or whatever, to actually get into that squished position that you need to be in to get to the ground, stuff gets in the way. So that is an action of the pose, which is quite important. You need to be able to instruct people to really twist and lean far over to get their hands to go. We need to get stuff out of the way. So pulling legs out of the way, pulling tummy out of the way. It's an action of the pose, okay? Because we've got to get to the ground, right? But we don't require twist flexibility. We require action, okay? So in something like Parshvabhakasana, that what would you say the pose is more of? A strength pose, a flexibility pose, or an action pose? Micah.
I think mainly action, so the skill that you know where to place everything.
Exactly. So mainly action. Absolutely. Getting the people to put themselves in the position that you want them to get into. Because if you don't get your upper arm way over your thigh, way over, you're not going to be able to create the shelf. Okay, so it's much more of an action-based pose, of course, requiring, you know, chaturanga-ish strength. Chaturanga is harder than these arm balances, okay? Because what we're really doing is just hanging there in the arm balance. You do require some strength, but you don't require a lot of it. It's much more about shape. And then what else is going on when we talk about look forward, lean forward, shelf placement, levers, all of those things, getting the person in the right position. What if we've got them in the right position and they can't do the pose? What is often the reason that they can't?
Fear.
Fear, because they don't want to fall on their face. Okay, so what could we do about that fear?
Blocks.
Put a cushion?
Not blocks. Yes, blocks, but depending on where, Lynn, as long as it's not in front of your face. It's like,
And feet.
yes, so we could put a bolster in front of their face. You as a teacher can be there in front of them, encouraging them to lean and look forward, not down, because that's when you're going to go down. And of course, you can have your feet up on blocks, right? And come up onto a tiptoe, and then maybe one leg off at a time, others, or just leaning forward. So in your sequence, progressively, you will have people maybe in your peak pose section, slowly lean forward, but don't take your feet off the ground. Lean forward a little bit more. Maybe you can have one toe off the ground. Lean forward a little bit more. Maybe you can take both feet off the ground, etc. So there's progressions within the peak pose. Does that make sense? Everybody got that? Okay. So now
Yes.
Ashtha Vakrasana, 8-angle pose. Also a twist. Okay, because basically your legs are going one way and you're going kind of diagonally the other way. What's the difference between Ashtha Vakrasana and Parshva Vakrasana? Does everybody know Ashtha Vakrasana? Were you hooking your feet? Okay. So in terms of flexibility, what does Ashtha Vakrasana 8-angle pose require, if any? Andrea.
Open hips.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Open hips.
Open hips, yes. How? What open hips? What needs to be warmed up?
The hamstrings.
Yes.
So that you can put one leg on top of your shoulder.
Yes, exactly. So hamstrings, adductors sometimes as well, like a little bit of groin work, and also possibly some hip external rotation. It's not too much, but it's more because what do we do before we go, generally, before we go into the final 8-angle pose? What's the kind of pose that comes before it?
Compass.
Compass, yes. Yeah. So, and we all know that compass requires us, like Andrea is saying, to take our leg behind our shoulder, which is asking a lot of flexibility for most people, right? Why does it help us be more flexible, warmed up flexibility to get the leg behind the shoulder? Why is that useful for the pose? Come on, why is it useful, Andrea?
To create the shelf.
To create the shelf, okay? So what would happen if I'm not so flexy, or girth also gets in the way of this as well? What will happen to my leg, not in the pose, but when I'm doing compass, the pose before? What will happen?
Slips, falls from your arm.
It does, exactly. So if I can only hook to just above my elbow, not high up, the minute I start to straighten my arms even a little bit, I'm going to slide off, okay? I'm literally going to go and slide off the pose. So that you still can do the pose, but then I'm sure you guys understand this now. The more flexible we are in a lot of these poses, like Astabhyakrasana, 8 angle, Fireflies, another classic, the more flexible we are, the less strength we need, okay? We can hang out in the pose. We just sort of hook arms over, legs over, and we can just stay there and chat for half an hour. The people that don't have the strength can still do the pose, but their legs are suspended almost in mid-air. So then they have to squeeze everything in and use huge amount of ab and arm strength. So we can still do the pose, but it's much, much harder. But you can see Astabhyakrasana is a twist, but it requires flexibility. Twisted crow doesn't really, okay? Different things. Does that make sense? Then what else do we need with Astabhyakrasana? It's an arm balance, we know that. And we know there's the look forward, lean forward. We've got the shelf right. We've worked flexibility, all of those things. What else do we need for Astabhyakrasana for 99% of people that we don't really need for the other, something like Ekapada Galavasana, Flying Pigeon, or Twisted Crow? What do we need?
Oh,
Your shoulders need to be like pushed. They need to be retracted back as you're pushing down.
They will be, definitely, because you're almost in a chaturanga shape. So depending on how low you go, your scapula retract, but they will just do that anyway. It depends on how bent you've got your arm. But there's something else that we need, and we use it when we do inversions.
Wrists?
Fiction.
No, not wrists.
Chloe?
Does it the momentum to hook?
Yay, it's momentum, okay? So this is why everything is slightly different. In order to go, when we go into compass, we've got our leg behind here and we hook our foot, okay? We're sitting quite far back in this position. It depends which way, I'm sure Laura has told you, there's a lot of different ways to get into the pose. You can hook foot first, or you can do compass, pick up, and then hook afterwards, right? But we need to go from this upright pose forward, okay? And we have to use momentum for 8 angle pose. Because, and I know it sounds silly, but most people are very nervous of doing that. Who's happy doing 8 angle? Gary? Oh, not a lot of you. No. Jamie's going, okay. If you can get yourself into the position, as in decent-ish compass pose, a hook, the only reason you're not able to do the pose is because you're not swinging forward enough. Okay, that's the rule. With 8 angle, you have to swing forward. And normally it's very scary for people because they think, like in Bakasana, in Crow, they're going to face smash. But actually you don't. You just swing forward. I'll make a video for you guys. You swing forward, and even if you face smush, you sort of go, and come down, okay? But you need, Chloe's laughing, she's probably had the same experience. So, but you need the momentum to go from the back position forward, right? And that is a really important part of the 8 angle pose. So you can see that the arm balances are a little bit different, right? So what is the general thing? What will tire?
Your wrists.
Yeah, your wrists are going to touch. Shoulders, maybe, but generally it's going to be your wrists that tire a little bit. And again, it's that classic situation that we all find ourselves in, most of us anyway, in yoga, is we come in and we haven't done stuff on our hands kind of ever for most people, all right? Unless you're an ex-gymnast or whatever. We don't do stuff in any other sport really using our hands and wrists like we do in yoga. So people come in and they're going, oh, Natalie's doing this, which makes me think her wrists are actually a little bit sore, okay? So with the wrists in yoga, it's progressive loading. We can't do it in one class. It doesn't work. It's over time. The more you do it, for most people, unless you've got something like carpal tunnel, for most people, your wrists get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger over time if you don't push it, okay? But within a class setting, we don't want to do massive like planks, lean forward planks, this, other, etc. because the wrists, people's wrists, they don't like it when it gets a little bit sore, all right? So that's pretty much what will tire. Okay, so is everybody happy with the arm balance section now that I've given you all your things? Oh, the one thing I want to say is you've got a lot of Jason Crandall's sequences in your manual, okay? Do not replicate them when you give them to me, when you give your sequence to me. It's got to be your own idea. I don't mind like a couple of poses in and things like this, but do not replicate them because I need you to think about these things. My job is to try and get you to analyze the pose, which you are doing for your own 3 poses, and then to put it together in a sequence so that you know, hang on a second, what's going on in this pose? How do I teach it? How do I break it down? All right, Michelle.
Should we, when we're thinking about the poses, should we be thinking about them linking together, or should we just actually think about what it is we need to warm up before we get to the finished pose?
Do you mean linking together? You're talking about the transitions?
Yes. Should we keep that in the back of our minds, or should we just take that off the table and just think about what do we need to warm up in order to get to the final?
I would personally, and look, it really does depend on how you think, but personally, I would just keep it to the poses first because the transitions are secondary. It depending on what you do and in the order that you do them, you're going to do different transitions. So I personally would leave the transitions until you've nailed your poses and gone, okay, that's what I'm going to do, because a transition lying or seated or standing, they're all completely different because they've got to be smooth. So that would be my advice. I'm not saying don't do it, but if I do take the pose out, then you've kind of wasted your time, which I know you guys are busy. So that would be my advice, Michelle.
Okay.
Okay. I'll try and get them out for you tomorrow. When I put classes together, I have a little scrap of paper like this, if any nowadays, but a little scrap of paper like this, and I have maybe 6 things written on it. And then those are the general ideas that I've got, the big things, and then I just link depending on who's in the class. So it can be a fast flow, or it can be long, slow holds. So the transitions are always secondary, but they're very important, but more from a choreograph perspective than anything else, you know, how you want to be as a teacher, that kind of thing. We'll talk about them a little bit more tomorrow. All right. Okay. So I want to talk about back bends. All right. I want to talk mainly about dances. We've got Urdhva Dhanurasana in there as well, but we've also talked a lot about Urdhva Dhanurasana up to now, but we're going to link the same thing. So what I want to talk about is who's doing full dances. Oh, Gudrun, there we go. You went all dark. I could hardly see you, okay? Is anybody else doing? Only one person doing, I can't remember. Okay.
Me.
There you go, Candy. Okay. So full dances, okay? So does everybody know what that is? You're standing on one leg. We're not talking about half dances where you're reaching back like this and just holding your foot. That's not hard, okay? Everybody can do that. If you can balance on one leg, you can do that pose, right? This is full dances where you're either holding your toe or you're using a strap. Okay, so in terms of difficulty of poses, what do you think is harder, full wheel or dances?
Dances.
Dances.
Way harder. Okay, way harder for many different reasons. Okay, what would you say is harder, full dances or a split arm balance? So Ekapada Kundiyasana 2, which is splits on your arms.
Full dances.
Full dances. Okay. What would you say is harder, handstand or full dances?
Full dances.
Full
dances.
dances.
Okay, you're getting my point. I'm not saying you should be able to balance in your hands in the middle of the room, but pretty much at some stage, you can walk up the wall or something in a handstand, right? Okay, it's much more skill-based, right? Full dances, you've chosen one of the hardest poses that we have in yoga, all right? So, talk to me about the flexibility required for full dances.
Spinal flexion.
Candy.
Oh, sorry, Flower. Spinal flexion, hip extension, shoulder.
And?
What's this one again? Shoulder extension.
No, you said it right. Shoulder flexion. Yep. So you've got.
That's it. Oh, shoulder flexion. Got it.
Your back bend, shoulder flexion, ability to take your shoulders over your head. Okay. Hip extension. That means your back leg is stretched like it's never been stretched before in its life. But what else?
Hamstrings.
Hamstrings. So look what we're talking about in terms of flexibility. Okay. So if I wasn't in a back bend in full dances, and instead of pulling my foot to my head, I just pulled it up there, what would I be doing?
A standing split.
A full-on, not even standing splits, a one-legged standing splits.
Okay. A whopper.
It's a huge pose. So now, when poses are huge like that, you're not going to be teaching that to beginners. Absolutely no point at all. Okay, so you're going to be teaching it either to intermediate or advanced people. Either as if they're advanced, they're going to be bang doing it in the middle of the room, or if they're intermediate and learning the pose, you might want to take them to the wall and then use a strap so that they can start to work on the progressions in the pose. But because it's such a complex pose and you're in a 60-minute class, do you think there's any point lying on your back doing Supta Padangusthasana, stretching your hamstring? Gudrun, Candy?
Yeah, to warm up.
Doing harm.
Say again?
Yes.
Just
to
a
warm up.
Sorry, Lynn, hang on a second. I can hear you, but I can't hear it. When you speak, Gudrun is speaking, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, just a bit. You just need to like get the, just to, you won't be there long. It's just gonna, I don't know.
The answer is no, okay? To be able to do full dances, you almost pretty much need to be able to do splits. If splits is your sequence and you're planning to teach it to people who are quite happy and very flexible in the hamstrings, lying them down on their backs doesn't warm up a thing, okay? What we're looking for is serious warming. So it's like looking at if your peak pose was Utthita Hasta Padangusthasana, so standing, holding your leg out to the front. That's your peak pose, okay? That pose would work very well with you starting lying down on your back. But when you get to dances, first thing is, it's such a complex pose, right? You've said you need to warm up quads, hamstrings, shoulder flexion, it's a balance and a back bend. So that's a lot. So it's a forward bend and a back bend and a balance, okay? You don't have time to lie on your back, stretching your hamstrings out, okay? You just don't have time at all. You definitely need to stretch your hamstrings out, but you start on a much higher level, okay? You start, so your basic first hamstring pose would be pyramid at the very least, and that would be like a baby pose for these people that can do this, okay? So it's like, because you've got to get so much else in, we've got to stretch those quads like mad. There's no point doing a kneeling cat-cow and stretching the quads. We need to stretch on a grand level. So even in half dances, you can have splits in beforehand. Okay, that's a prep pose for not half dances, full dances. So the warming up, so we've got to start at a much higher level because it's a much harder pose, right? We can't start at the same level as just standing one leg forward, leg bend, leg Utthita Hasta Padangusthasana, leg out in front. Okay, so how would we warm up the quads? And a low lunge isn't going to do it. It can be part of a sun salutation, but it's not going to be warming enough for them. So how would we do it? What's a great way of warming up the pose? The quads for the pose.
Mermaid?
Mermaid. Candy, do you say mermaid? Yeah. So mermaid.
I did, yes.
Mermaid, bringing your back leg in. And mermaid is a back bend, right? Okay. And full dances is so challenging that mermaid, like splits, can be a prep pose for full dances. That's how radical full dances is. The crazy pose, right? Does everybody know in handstand and in pincha, forearm balance, there's also the versions where you put your foot on your head, so you're in a back bend in the pose. That's easier than full dances, okay? If you've got the inversion down like an arm balance, it's easier, right? So full dances is a big pose. So we can see that we start quad stretching at a grand level. We start hamstrings at a grand level, okay? We can put in back bends, all right? And we need to put in shoulder flexion. So, and big range of shoulder flexion. How could we put in shoulder flexion? And this isn't going to cut it for full dancers, okay? Because we need to go back. Gudrun, did you have your hand up?
Yes. So, sorry, not, what do you call it? Resting pose with your shoulders out in front of you, your arms out in front of you, stretching them to the sides.
Yes. So that's a
and
really
then also,
yes. So Gomukhasana, arms, Garudasana, all of those things, but even more. So
full wheel.
Full wheel. Yes. Daisy, did you say that? Yeah. Full wheel. You could seriously do full wheel as a shoulder flexion. But I like the child's idea with stretching your arms, but then you would need to make it more. So it would almost become like, I think it's called puppy, where you're sinking through the chest and almost coming into like a little bit of a back bend. So not our lovely child's where we all just nice rest and stretch to the sides, because we need to get that shoulder flexion really working. So hands on blocks, all of those kind of things would warm up for dancers, but so would full wheel. Absolutely, right? So things like shoulder flexion. So Candy said mermaid, okay? Strap, mermaid. All of those things will stretch out as much as you can for full dancers. The other thing with full dancers, if you're not doing it for advanced people, you can all pop into it, and it is really rare to see it. Really, really rare. In 20 odd years, I think I've seen it 2 or 3 times where somebody can actually stand in the middle of the room, grab their back foot and do this and put their foot on their head. Okay, it's really rare to see. So normally what you would be doing is going to the wall with the strap, okay? The same strap that I'm sure you've all used in pigeon as well, right? So you'd have to instruct, you'd have to put aside a certain amount of time to get everybody to go to the wall if you were going to teach full dancers, okay? Because you can't just go, okay, half dancers, for those that can go into full dancers, off you go, because that's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to help them get to full dancers, to work on it. So you have to allocate a bit of your sequence to actually going to the wall, okay? Right, what will tire in full dancers? A lot of things, okay? What will tire? Belinda.
The standing leg.
Absolutely, standing leg. What else?
Your lower back.
your lower back. Oh yes, big time back bend. So we don't want to do a lot of crunchy back bends before. With full dances, we're working around it. We're working the hamstrings, the quads, all of that stretching stuff, the shoulder flexion, and then something like mermaid to a degree and a little wheel is actually quite a nice thing for those people that can do full dances because they're such backbenders anyway. It's quite a good way of getting in without crunching. What we wouldn't want to do is do endless cobras and all that because it's not useful. Your vertebrae just do this, bang, and you're just going to go, it doesn't warm anything up, okay? But what we would also need to bring in is some kind of spinal mobility, okay? So twisting movements, lifting up movements, cactus, all of that kind of stuff within your big poses that you're choosing. So we could do a lunge pose to stretch quads, take the leg up, back leg out, and then bend the knee a little bit of the back leg. Go and try it, Gudrun and Candy, because, oh my word, you get a quad stretch. And then, so you can play around with things like that. And then you can add lift up, maybe bend a little bit back, turn and twist whilst you're stretching out your quads, okay? Because there's so much going on in the pose. It's a big one to choose and super fun and a really, really great way to learn because you're doing back bends, you're doing a balance, and you're doing hamstrings. So it's like a big learning thing. Plus, you've also got to do a kind of wall sequence where you go, okay, I'm really going to teach the action of the pose. And then what I would need you to understand for that pose is how to flip the grip, right? Candy and Gudrun, I don't know if everybody should know how to do this anyway. So you're literally taking your hand back, taking hold of your strap like this, and then you bend your elbow and bring it forward. And I can send you a video, okay? Have you done it with Laura, flip the grip?
Yes.
No. Okay, so I can send you a video of that, and that's it. Look, you can do it in other ways where you've got a strap and you walk yourself down the strap, but it doesn't work as well. So flipping the grip is quite a good way. It's really easy. You'll get it like that just by trying it, okay? And it's the only way you can, I shouldn't say the only way, for most people, it's the only way they can ever get hold of their foot. You take hold of the toe and you lean back and flip the grip, but I'll send you a video on it. Okay, so I think we're done with dances. Any questions, Gudrun and Candy? No? All good. All right. Okay, so let's do how we're doing time-wise. Okay. All right. So inversions. Okay, we're going to do inversions very quickly because I know you did it quite a bit with Laura this morning, and then we'll do the forward bend section. So inversions. Strength, skill, flexibility. Which one is the most important?
Skill. Skill.
Skill. Okay. Skill is the most important thing for inversion, right? So what skill do we require?
Control.
Straight arms.
Straight arms, excellent. Whoever said that, okay? Yeah, depending on what you're doing, inversion, okay? Drishti, okay? Focus point. So if you're doing an inversion, you need to tell them focus point, okay? First, we get very carried away because now you guys understand things like look forward and lean and arm balances, all of those things. But the most important thing before all of those things is placement, okay? Placement of stuff, right? So in the arm balances, like we said, where you put your shin or whatever it is on top of your arm is placement, okay? If you're in twisted crow, if you don't get their placement right, which is their side of their thigh, on their upper arms, depending if they're doing it on two arms or on one arm, okay? You can tell them to look forward and lean forward and all of those wonderful things, but if they haven't got the placement, nothing's gonna happen, right? And people need to know, I mean, you guys, I'm sure most of you know that you've been to vinyasa classes and somebody said crow or, I don't know, whatever, hurdlers, and you don't even know where to put stuff. It's like, you know, so you can instruct drishti and focus, but if they haven't got their placement right, it's going to be really, really hard for them. So where you put your hands, where you put your shin or whichever bit in arm balance, that's key, right? So in something like handstand, let's say handstand, okay, what placement do we need?
Hands.
On your shoulders.
Yes, we need our hands for a handstand. And yes, they are like this, but how do I get somebody up into handstand? Where do I tell them to be?
With their shoulders over their wrist.
Nicole, you said shoulders over wrist.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. If you do not instruct, shoulders lined up with wrist, not so much over wrist, but shoulders lined up with wrist. You can have shoulders over wrist, but it's scary for most people. Shoulders have to be lined up with your wrists. If you don't, we can start the handstand from a short down dog or a long down dog. There's lots of ways of starting it. But if we start from a long down dog, what do we need more of? That's when our shoulders are way behind our wrists.
We need more push, momentum.
Momentum, yes. So then that's scary for people. So the first thing is, as much as possible, we need to stack the shoulders over the wrist. If you don't stack the shoulders over the wrist, you are going to have to run into your handstand, okay? Like literally run and throw yourself up against the wall. So, but these are like really basic things that, you know, you've learned in your pose demos, where to put your feet in a standing pose, you know. So you've all been to a class and been taught Trikonasana triangle, and the teacher will say, if you're a beginner, turn your front foot out, right? They're instructing placement, because if they didn't, you'd have to be looking around the room trying to figure out who's got what foot where and which way it should be. So it's the same thing in the more complex poses. Where does stuff go? Okay, that's key first, because if, you know, I can say, if I don't say shoulders over wrist and the person's really, really far away and I say look forward, first of all, they're so far away, they're going to have to throw their neck back to even try to look forward. And it's not going to help. So first, shoulders over wrist. Same thing with arm balances. Where do you put your stuff depending on which arm balance you're doing? They're obviously different. Okay, so I've got my shoulders over wrist, and then I can go drishti, gaze point. Where is it in handstand?
Just in front. So
yeah.
The triangle of your hands, it's sort of just there.
Just there, yeah, like a little kind of tripod-y thing. And it's not a strict rule. You know, for the really good hand balances, they can have it in between the hands. Some hand balances, the best in the world, don't even have to look, right? But generally, for people learning to kick up, you would want it a little bit in front, that little triangle, as Belinda says, okay? Right, okay? You want the arms straight. Somebody said that, straight arms, which is a really useful thing to have, okay? Somebody said it in a message to me or an email or whatever. The one thing you never, ever, 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 ever do is tell someone to micro bend their elbow, okay? In a handstand. If you do that, they will fall on their head, okay? The arms need to be locked out. If that is a slight hyperextension of the arms, that is fine. All the gymnasts have one anyway, all right? Okay, arm is straight. So you've got the placement. What do we need to warm up in terms of flexibility?
Hamstrings.
Sorry,
Hamstrings. I was going to say hamstrings.
Okay, hamstrings, right? We need to warm up hamstrings, okay? So that helps us walk in a little bit more, all right? Then what other thing do we have to place? We've placed the hands, we've placed shoulders over wrist. What else do we have to place?
Our feet.
Our feet, yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the feet, where do we put the one foot?
One up, one down.
One up, one down. But in what shape? So if I'm in a short down dog, I'm leaning forward a bit. I can tell you guys aren't following the beginner's handstand program because I think I posted it about 2 days ago. Okay, go shoulders over wrists. Okay, and then I step one leg in. Okay, and I'm on the ball of the foot, so my one leg is bent. Right? Okay, you really go and look at if you're doing, I know some of you are doing handstand, go look at the handstand program because it's going to give you all the actions that you need. You need to step your leg in. They can't both be in the same place. I mean, they can, but you have to be a good hand balancer to do it. So you need to step. It's kind of like, looks like people starting a race, a running race. Okay, you know how they crouch down and they've got the one leg bent in front and the other leg is behind slightly. Okay. Then you have to instruct, take the other leg up in the air. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Look at that, look at the actions of it all in that little program that's going on. It's a beginner's thing. You should, if you've got, want to build up strength, you should be doing it or adding it into your practice. Okay? So all of those things have got to be instructed. So we've got to warm up, flexibility, placement, and action. Handstand is a skill pose. That means that your sequence is going to be full of hamstring flexibility and then a lot of time probably at the wall, right? To be able to get the person to kick up, okay? What is the back leg doing in handstand? What's it similar to?
Warrior 3.
Warrior 3 and all of those other things that we talked about earlier, down dog, three-legged dog, all of those things, all of those places are taking the leg up and you've got to kick the leg up, right? So now we go to the wall with handstand. What do we start first? Like say we've got beginner to intermediate, and I think I asked you guys last week who was happy to balance in the middle of the room, and not many, I think 1 or 2 of you were like, maybe, okay? So if we're taking people to the wall to kind of workshop it, what do we start doing first? I'm sure Laura did it this morning with you guys.
A plank up the wall, so walking our feet up.
Walking your feet up the wall. Okay, so that builds strength. It gets people used to the feeling of being upside down. Takes away the biggest element of handstand, fear. It takes our momentum away. Remember I talked to you guys about this last week. Is that people are not scared as a rule of going upside down. They don't mind it at all, okay? Some people do if you've got glaucoma or you're dizzy, but on the whole, everybody can walk up a wall, right? But what they can't do is kick up because that's the same thing. It's that momentum and you have to go fast forward and then we're scared of face us. So we can walk up the wall. We can take one leg off, put it back, other leg off, put it back, and then maybe turn around, okay? So you can see its progression, and handstand, like forearm balance, is skill. Skill means lots and lots of actions, lots of practice, and normally a war. Any other questions about handstand? No? All good. All right. So speeding through the last ones, right? Forward bend section. Okay, so I'm including in the forward bend section, and I can't remember who put it in, Ekapada Vashisthasana. Side plank with your leg up. Whose was that? Ah, Nicole. Okay, all right. So we've got a mix of these things. So I'm including that. It is an arm balance as well. All right. Parivita Janushirasana, where you wide legs, bent leg in, and then we over and holding the toe. Bird of paradise, all of those things, okay, are hamstring poses. Okay? Does that make sense? Right? So let's look at bird of paradise. Who's doing bird of paradise? Who's doing bird of paradise? Ah, Cynthia, there you are. Okay. There you are. Okay, so that's good. I'm not going to put you on the spot because I want everybody to kind of, because you know what, you're only doing this one sequence now. Then you're going to go out there and teach, and your entire lives are going to be like sequencing and trying to put stuff together. So it's like so bird of paradise. What is it first of all?
Balance.
It's a balance, right? One-legged balance. So what will tire?
The one leg.
Standing leg.
The one leg. Yeah, your one leg, your ankle, all of those kind of things. Okay, so what is required in terms of, so when we talk about what will tire, it's like your one leg, that's also where the strength is needed as well, right? It's going to be your ankle strength to stand up there. So we don't want to beat it up because it's not nice for it, okay? So what I wouldn't want to see in any one leg balance pose, or even we can use side plank, because this is one, is endless side planks or endless one leg balance pose. Like 1 or 2 is fine, but you don't want people's ankle to be a foot to have cramped up so much by the time they get to the big pose, right? It doesn't make any sense. I'm sure some of you have experienced this. It's like, I'm tired now, so I don't want that. All right, so so we've covered the strength. What do we need in terms of flexibility for Bird of Paradise? Which needs more flexibility? Parivrtta Janu Sirsasana, which is, I don't know what it's called, wide-legged forward bend. You bend the one leg in and then you are folding, then you're folding over your leg. Does everybody know which pose I mean? I don't know what it's called. Is it going to be called?
Janu something.
I don't know what it's called. Anyway, which one requires more flexibility? Bird of Paradise or the wide?
Parivrtta Janu Savasana.
Who's saying?
Parivrtta Janu Sarasana.
Yeah, Parivrtta Janu Sirsasana. Yeah, I know what it's called in Sanskrit. I just don't know what it's called in English.
Revolved head of knee pose.
There you go. That one. All right. Okay, so which requires more flexibility?
Bird of Paradise.
Paradise.
Who's the, there you go, Candy. So I've got ding, there we go. Bird of Paradise, way more flexibility. Okay? Why does Bird of Paradise require more flexibility? It's a little bit tricky compared to Parivrtta Janu. Nicole.
Is it because all of your load is on the one leg?
It is because, yes, your load is on the one leg, but it's more than that. It's more than that.
Is it because the other leg is in external hip rotation whilst you're standing on the one leg?
Yes, and a little bit more than that. Yes, so it's similar thing, but even more. So does everybody, I presume, knows Bird of Paradise? So your leg is up here, but what is your arm doing in Bird of Paradise? Micah?
Bind.
It's binding, okay? So even before we start to look at things like external rotation or any of those things, the first thing is Bird of Paradise, you're standing on one leg, you've taken your other leg up really high, maybe, if you got to the final version. Your arm is wrapped around and it's pulling on your leg, and to be able to bind in that pose, you have pulled your leg back so far, or you can't bind. Okay, then so your leg is being taken. So if I stand up and I take my leg up, just up there, like Utthita Hastapana Gustasana, my leg's up there, no problem. When I take a bind and then pull it, in order for me to stand up, right? I've got to bind down there. I've got to stand up. I've got to pull my leg. So my leg is not here like it is in from the side. In Utthita Hastapana Gustasana, my leg would be about here. In Bird of Paradise, my leg needs to be there in order for me to bind. Okay, so it requires way more flexibility because we've imprisoned people in a bind. Okay.
Oh, which way does it go?
Huge flexibility. With Parivrtta Janu, people will just go as far as they can go, right? It's like we're not squishing them and tying them up like with their arms and things and saying hold that pose. They just stop wherever they can go, right? Whereas anything where you are binding or when you're hooking your feet behind your head, all of those things, you require much more flexibility in, Cynthia, and you're absolutely right, in external rotation. So it is much more about stretching adductors and hamstrings, so inner groin muscles and hamstrings, a lot more than Parivrtta Janu Sirsasana. okay? In the progression of hamstrings and adductor flexibility poses, Bird of Paradise is way harder from the flexibility point of view than Parivrija Janu, okay? So that means the stretches are gonna have to be more, but they both need the same stretches, okay? They both need hamstrings and they both need adductor stretching. It's just the Bird of Paradise needs more, all right? Okay, so what else does Bird of Paradise, I mean, what would we have to do with the bind? How, is the bind an action thing or do we have to stretch? What do you think?
Rotating.
It's internal rotation and, you know, it's just a bind, but is it an action or is it something you think we have to warm up? Any guesses?
Do you have to warm up your shoulders to do that?
Natalie, say again. Sorry, I didn't hear properly.
Oh, I was just saying, don't you have to warm up your shoulders to bind?
Yes and no. Yeah, I would because for me, I've got really short arms, and for me, when I bind, I have to really pull out of the shoulders. So I quite like these types of things, reverse prayer, all of those things that warm up the front of the shoulder and a little bit here. And also I'm quite tight because I do too many handstands. So it would be good for me and for an average person to kind of warm up, but more in a kind of sweet, juicy action of pose rather than like, I don't know, just boring stretches. But definitely you would warm it up. But we'd also need the action of the pose. So how do you get into Bird of Paradise? What's the pose before?
Is it the extended side angle?
It is. Normally it's extended side angle. Has everybody done the pose or tried to do the pose?
Yes.
Yeah, so normally
Yes.
it's an extended side angle and then we have to bind, right? We have to go under our leg and then hook the hands behind, okay, and then step forward, okay? So the bind needs to be instructed quite a bit because often what people do in the bind is in order to get into the bind, they lean far forward, okay, to get into the bind, but they have to be instructed, lean forward to bind and then lean back, okay? So it's a little bit tricky and I'm sure some of you have done the bind and then your bind is not a very solid bind. So this is really important, this grip. And then what else does Bird of Paradise need? Now we've got you in this crazy, stupid bind in extended side angle. And then what's the instruction? Hop forward. Okay, all right? So then you're kind of like hopping forward and then it's kind of like, if you can come up, right? And then straighten out the leg, right? So then we have to instruct what? What does it become then? So it's moved from hamstring adductors binding to
balancing.
Balance. Okay, so the people need to look, right? So it's instructing things like, you know, scoot your leg forward a bit. Now, maybe focus on a bit in front of you on the wall or whatever it is, and then slowly come up. And the key to Bird of Paradise, I don't know how many people can do it here, the absolute key to Bird of Paradise, if you've got enough, if you can bind and you've got enough hamstring flexibility, the absolute key is to put as much weight as possible into your standing leg and be really light with the leg that you are picking up. Because what most people do is they lean into this leg and then it pulls them over. You actually almost have to lift the leg up whilst in the bind, so you're not putting all your weight there and lean over a bit. And that's basically Bird of Paradise, okay? But complex. And you can see with Parivrija Janu, Shirasasana, it's not. It's Parivrija Janu, Lynn's already done a lot of it already, is a lateral flexion, side bend, it's hamstrings, it's adductors, it's a little bit of a twist, okay? It's basically, fundamentally, it's a forward bend sequence with a lot of lateral spine flex because you're going over like this, okay? Right, any questions on those things? Okay, last one. that I want to talk about, okay? Ekapada Vashisthasana. Who's doing it? It was Nicole, right? Nicole L. Right? Okay. So that is side plank, where you take your leg, one leg up in the air, all right? It's a tough pose, okay? So what's it first and foremost, the category of pose?
Balance.
Balancing.
It's a balance, but even before that.
Plank.
Plank. Yeah, so it's a balance, but it's an arm balance, right? It's an arm balance. It's just one arm, it's an arm thing, right? So we know because it's an arm balance, if you go and do hundreds of arm balances before the arm balance, there's going to be a tiring of the arms, all right? So you don't want to do endless side planks, because side plank, as I'm sure most of you know, is tough, and it's very tough when you start taking the leg up and holding the toe, all right? So you can't put in a lot of arm balances beforehand, just a bit, you know, maybe one or two, that's fine. A side planks, anyway. What's the leg doing up there? What is required from that leg, the one that you're holding?
Hamstring and adductor stretching.
Yes, Sina, yes, big time, right? Okay, so it requires loads of hamstring and loads of adduct, like stretch that out a lot. So forget if there's side plank with my leg up there, if I turned myself upright and stood up, what would the pose look like? But
Triangle.
Candy, did you speak?
I did, and I think it looks like triangle.
Exactly. It looks like triangle. What else does it look like?
Half moon.
Standing half split.
Half moon, not so much half splits, a little bit of it, but definitely a pose that you could bring in for just hamstrings, not adductors. What else does it look like? So we've got triangle, half moon. So you're looking at it from the front. So I'm sure that Laura's told you, I'll be with you now, Belinda. Laura's told you, you know, when you face the front of the mat and we just taking our leg up like this, it's working hamstring. When we kind of the side of our mat, so we're doing things like extended side angle, triangle, half moon, we're doing hamstrings and adductors, inner groin muscles, because our legs are wider apart. So what else? What else can we do? Belinda, sorry. Yeah.
The standing pose where you're holding your toe out to the side.
Perfect. Yes. Utthita Hasta Padangusthasana, okay? Extended something to nose, something like that. I have no idea what they call it. They're just too long. All right. So, yes, absolutely. So, taking your leg, standing, taking your leg out to the side, which we can do lying on our back, right? We could do what pose kind of? Do you think we could do that seated, that action?
Seated forward fold.
Absolutely, seated forward fold. We could do Parivrtta Janusharsasana with one leg bent in and the other leg out. We can do it seated like compass, right? Compass pose, taking your leg out, taking your leg behind. So there are hundreds of poses like that, and they are hamstring, groin, hip external rotation poses. So your whole sequence would be loads of those, and you can make stuff up too. Like they don't have to be yoga poses, because half of yoga poses in vinyasa aren't yoga poses anyway. Make it up. Like cradle four is not a real pose. It's just a way you stretch your hips out, you know. So make it up as you go along, right? And then Ekapada Vashisthasana with the action of the pose, the skill of the pose. What skill do you think you need for the pose?
Balance and focus, I suppose.
Balance and focus, absolutely. And the tricky thing is with this pose is in order to get hold of the toe, you have to bend the leg in. And people then take hold of the toe. They lean forward, kind of like people do in Bird of Paradise when they do extended side angle, but they all lean forward, but they never lean back. Okay, so normally what happens is somebody's got hold of this and then they shake forward like this for quite some time. The action is with the leg bent, leaning back. Then you move to, if you can, a slightly straighter leg. Okay, so that's the skill of the pose, because you have to lean forward, kind of like a bind, and then you have to lean back into the pose. So you can see how complex all of these poses are, right? That's quite a lot of stuff going on. All right, I have talked so much. I need to go. Okay, so because this has been like, normally you guys talk a lot more, but I wanted to cover all of these things. So does anybody have any questions? Gary?
So for this sequencing task, it's not like our pose analysis where we have to take photos and send them to you. It's all use the template and write down the whole sequence.
Yeah, yes. So in the document, it's intelligent sequencing, wellness connection intelligent sequencing, which was emailed to you in course criteria, the email. There's first page is like that template where you're going to write your 12 poses down. Okay, that's or 12 to 16 poses. Fill out the strength, flexibility, skill needs, and your poses. Right. Then when I've ticked those off, then I'm going to they go back to you, and then you are going to add transitions into those poses. We'll talk about the transitions tomorrow, but long story short, I don't need you to write the right side out and the left side out, but I'll talk to you a little bit more about that tomorrow. Just for now, I need those 12, well, not now, it's next week, 14th, I think, the 12 to 16 poses, and so that I can see, they've understood, and then I'm going to talk to you a bit about transitions tomorrow, how you're going to choose your transitions, and then you'll add those in between the poses. Okay? Any other questions quickly? Nicole? Oh, no.
All right. I do have a question though, but for tomorrow, the 9th of August, we need to send you the photos with the breakdowns.
Yes.
Correct? Yes.
Correct.
And then a separate one to Lauder with the 3 poses and her requirements.
Say again. So let me be clear. So 9th of August, you send me your 3 poses, the pose analysis that you're doing by your lonesome, okay? That you look, Laura said, yes, you can do those 3. Then I need pictures or videos and the breakdown of those poses, okay? For the peak pose sequencing, that's on the 14th of August, yes. The summary. That's all you need to worry about yet. And then the transitions, okay? Which I think is a week or so later than that.
Okay, perfect.
Is that right? Okay.
I had forgotten about the videos and the pictures. I've already sent you my pose analysis, those 3 poses. Can you just refresh and I'll redo it? Because I include videos and photos. I forgot about that.
That's fine. I won't look at them until tomorrow anyway. So absolutely fine. Yeah, I must have pictures and or videos because otherwise I can't see. Well, you know, I need.
So the pictures or videos of us doing the poses.
Yes. So if you go to the peak pose sequencing, sorry, I beg your pardon, the pose analysis videos, right at the end, there are 3 examples. They are just samples of what people have added in. It's literally got little pictures and you going, oh, this is what my pose looks like in crow. Oh, I can see another picture. Otherwise, I'm not looking for an analysis breakdown of the pose itself. I'm looking for you in the pose. Okay, so I need to see you. All right. Okay.
Okay, I'll go back into that now.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Good. Okay. Just send me a message if you've got questions. Go have tea, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good evening when you get there, because I know some of you aren't going to be there for a while. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.